welcome into another episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. You guessed it. You didn't hear the intro. In the intro, you didn't hear the voiceover. Alan Saunders' name. He's not here. Nick Farabaugh joining me again. Nick, how we doing?
We're doing well, Smitty. We are
You
doing
sound
well.
better.
Yeah, I am. I'm feeling a little better, so it's all good. I made everyone that basically went to the combine and got back feels like they got sick.
Ooh, okay. Yeah, there's
um,
definitely. So I was sick. It got me 3 weeks ago now, 2, 3
yeah,
weeks ago. But it ran through my. So it started with my mom. My mom's in education. She's a special education teacher. So being at the school around all the kids and stuff, she gave it to me. I gave it to my dad. So it's made its way through our house too. But yeah, everybody at the combine. Damn, that sucks.
dude, it stinks, and it makes sense though, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Like when you really think about it, uh, dude, how many people did I come in contact with the combine, from media members to scouts to
Mm-hmm.
prospects to yada yada yada. So
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
I
not
guess get it
surprised.
now. Get it out of the way. I don't know before we get into the real thick of things in the free agency and the draft season. So, but Nick, we're going to talk a lot about that today. We talked about obviously the linebackers. We touched some corners yesterday, and we kind of let the questions be our guide. We're going to do that again today. Man, that kind of felt like the thing Tomlin would say. Let the questions be our guide. But anyway, we're going to let some of the questions here be our guide for a lot of the show. But I wanted to start with talking about free agent safeties. So we talked about linebackers, we've talked about corners. Another piece of that puzzle on the back end, though, the safeties. Man, this market just keeps getting more and more quality players. I've mentioned in the past, for anybody that's listened to the show, more than just this this episode, that I would rather the Steelers dip their toes into the free agent market when it comes to safety and not spend a draft pick on it, just because there's so many quality starters out there. Where are you with that? And when you look at the market right now, who are some guys that just scream like they're a great fit for you?
Yeah, there's a lot of free agent safeties, and I mean that. It is astronomically big at this point, and they're all so talented, dude. Like, I could start at the top. You have, Jordan Poyer and all of those guys, but you go down, you have guys like Cam Curl, you have Kyle Duggar, who's on the transition tag, which is a little different, but he's still technically a free agent. You have Julian
Mhm.
Blackman, you have Jordan Whitehead. All these guys are getting cut, man. And the class is insane. Like, it is such a deep free agency class. To me, that's the way you got to go fix this. Like, I don't know why you wouldn't fix it via free agency, because one, it's a bad draft class. And two, the depth of the free agency class is so great. Some of the guys in that middle tier aren't going to be paid as much. And so that's the way I would go if I were the Steelers here at safety. Try and
Yeah.
find a guy like that. So you look at the market. I just named a few of them. We can name them all day, Smitty, but I think my favorite is
Yeah.
probably Julian Blackman,
Same.
just because
Yeah.
of his versatility. Played free safety in a cover three scheme for most of the first few years of his career. Played the box and slot last year, over 50% of the time, so can do both. I really like that fact about him. But man, so many names, and you probably are going to bring up a few names I didn't even bring up, because the
Well, I
depth
feel like one
and
that
the sheer
hasn't been
amount of
talked
it is
about a
crazy.
lot. I feel like one that hasn't been talked about a lot that I feel like could make some sense, has played, both spots, has played around the line of scrimmage too. Darnell Savage, who he didn't get his 5th year option picked up, and then I thought last year played better than any of his previous 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, he's fine. He's like one of those
Yeah.
okay players. I'm not a huge fan of his.
And this is
Um,
me again. I'm not bringing up. We actually got a question about like basically shooting for the moon here. This is not. This is me like saying guys that I feel like are realistic and kind of in that same bucket. Like again, we've talked about Jordan Whitehead. He's not breaking the bank either. Like Julian Blackman, I'm curious about. Like, what do you think that he would garner on the open market?
that's an interesting question. Julian Blackman is a really solid player. He's not a star player, but he's a solid player. And
Hmm.
so he's interesting. I believe Pro Football Focus is done by Brad Spielberger,
Yeah,
who's really solid at that.
he is as
Um,
good as anybody with free agency
yeah,
contract, man. Like,
he is. So his projection is 2 years, 11 and a half. Now that's
oh
total. So
wow,
it's
okay.
45.75 per year.
Hmm.
If that's all it costs, I think that should be. I'd be willing to go up, maybe 6.5, and maybe lure him away or something like that. From what I
Yeah.
know, I know enough people on the Colts beat. He is a priority for them to resign, but as
Hmm.
we know, the Steelers last year, Cam Sutton was certainly a priority for them to get back to, and all it takes is one team to, blow the market out, and that guy's gone. So
Sure.
I feel like he's a really, really good target for them. I just look at the position groups at safety, and Antoine Winfield Jr. was the top of the market. He's off it now, but Duggar's still in the market because of the transition tag that
Hmm.
he has on him. But Cam Curl's out there. Xavier McKinney, I believe, is a free agent now too.
Yep.
Geno Stone, Jordan Fuller, CJ Gardner Johnson. I like CJ Gardner Johnson. I think that'd be a nice fit. Obviously, very chirpy, can play in the slot. He'd be a really nice
Could
addition
play
as
anywhere.
well.
Quandre
Elliott.
Diggs, but he's on the older end. I don't know if that's really something that they're
Yeah,
interested in doing.
Alohi Gilman.
Uh,
Um, he Alohi Gilman was a pretty interesting player this year. Probably had the best year of his career in LA.
mhm.
Mike Edwards is out
I,
there.
actually, that's a good name to bring up because that was you mentioned Brad Spielberger. PFF put out a thing today with free agency defensive backs and linking them to teams. Mike Edwards, Jordan Whitehead, Adoree Jackson were the three that had the Steelers as a potential landing spot. What do you think of Mike? We talked obviously about Whitehead quite a bit. What do you think about Mike Edwards? And then even going back to the corners, which you talked about yesterday, Adoree Jackson's name didn't come up at all. He's a former Titans first round pick. He's also spent time in New York, played a few different defensive schemes. But like, is that a fit? Do you think there's still anything left in the tank there for him?
Yeah, Edwards is interesting. Was the third safety in the Chiefs' three safety looks this year.
Hmm.
Could work. I'm interested to see what he would look like as a full time starter. I think that one
Right.
might
I
be
thought
more
he
of
was
like
better in Tampa than last year in
yeah, I would
Kansas
agree with
City.
that. He feels like a guy that you would add as like a support safety. Could play the box. Could definitely give you an upgrade on Keanu Neal if that's like the goal, and you want him just to be Keanu Neal. Like he could definitely do that.
Hmm.
I also think we kind of got to talk about where the Steelers stand on Neal and KZ. I think that's a big part of
That
this entire
actually
thing. Do they
we put up
cut
the
Neal and
questions that came up.
KZ or do they run it back? They're both under contract. So technically, the Steelers, if they don't want to, they don't have to do anything. See, like they don't have to, but I think we both would
Yeah.
agree that they need to. And so, I
Yeah.
expect probably Neal to be cut. KZ, I'm not sure. I think that one's a little bit more murky. But we'll see. I think it's possible he gets cut too. But there's so many options. Mike Edwards fits in. If they keep KZ, like Mike Edwards makes a lot of sense as like the one they added
Sure.
to be the guy
Yeah.
that they could do there. Micah Hyde's a free agent this year. Like there's so many. J. Ron Curse. I mean Taylor Rapp. Kevin Byard and Eddie Jackson obviously are free agents too. They were cut. Terrell Edmonds. Like it is a deep group. But
Mhm.
I would be willing personally if let's say you cut the slate clean, KZ and Neil are both gone. Maybe you pay a Julian Blackman and then bring in I don't know Edwards or Rel, and that could be your three safety package. I'm cool with that. I would definitely look into bringing back Eric Rowe too for those three safety sets. I liked what he brought.
Yeah.
I know he's older, but I thought he played some solid ball. So I'd be looking into that. Now, as for Adoree Jackson, that's an interesting question. Obviously, you know what Adoree Jackson's best trait is his speed. There's no question about that. He's corner two probably more than he is a corner one. But I mean, I honestly haven't like dove into Adoree Jackson's 2023. I don't really know. At
Yeah.
his height, I always thought he was a pretty solid player. Not a superstar by any means, but his time at the beginning in New York, and certainly towards the end there in Tennessee were pretty solid. He's only 28, so he's not super old. He will be 29 this year. He's only 5'10", I want to say.
Right.
Obviously, but he's a guy that has some interesting traits. He's over his career been a guy that can be pretty scheme diverse. So he's usually not been too like locked in. But again, I haven't watched a ton of his tape, so I really can't say much. I'm just looking at PFF stats right now, just where they charted him.
Mhm.
Allowed 66% of his passes to be complete, 753 yards, two touchdowns all year on 82 targets, allowed 54 receptions. I mean, it's not terrible. Coverage grade was only 45.9 if you're into that. But I mean, it wasn't terrible. And Adoree Jackson probably won't cost a ton relative to
Yeah.
A
So
lot
is
of
Adoree Jackson maybe like I said yesterday, the same thing as like Dane Jackson, like that path?
Yeah, so Brad, if you trust him,
Hmm.
has 1 year, 6 mil for Adoree. So
Right. Okay.
that's
So
not terrible. I think he's an upgrade over Dane too, as you said.
I do believe that. I guess I meant in terms of just like a short-term solution with like the idea that you have maybe like a project that you really like or like hoping you hit on either whoever they draft because you feel like they're going to double dip. Even if they sign Adoree Jackson, that's not preventing you from taking a corner in the draft. And you still have Corey Trice and Darius Rush in the bank here as projects
You
too.
know,
So
okay, so I did a little bit of Adoree Jackson research while you were talking,
okay,
just on PFF just to see what he did, and this is interesting to me because we always think of Adoree Jackson. I feel like as an outside corner. Well, he played in the slot a lot last year, so
okay,
he's inside out versatile now. So I like that. Also, like his play pretty clearly on the back half of the season, like went up. Like he
hmm,
clearly was better in the second half of the season. A lot of those yards and a lot of his bad games were early in the year. Second half
yeah,
of the year, he looked much better. It looks like. And also, I do think I do know one thing about the Giants is Wink Martindale was obviously a guy that played a ton of cover zero blitz a lot. So corners were on islands a lot. So he's in man coverage a lot. One and two, he's not going to be in as much man coverage without help in the Steelers scheme. So you might see positive regression there. The only thing with him is he is hurt a lot. That's been one thing with the Adoree Jackson throughout his career. But like 1 year, 6 million with the strong end of the season, inside out versatile has been pretty solid here for the past, 2, 3 years before this. I don't know. I think for a 1 year, $6 million cost, like I can get
yeah.
down with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting as we had started recording, the Bills aren't done. They just weren't releasing their two safeties. They also released their starting center, Mitch Morse, was due to make $8.5 million in salary this upcoming season. So the Pro Bowler from 2022, now a free agent after 5 years with the Bills. We actually got a question on, so we might as well just tie it in so we don't have to answer this later. Somebody said Mitch Morse is fit with the Steelers. What do we think?
Yeah, Mitch Morse is fit with the Steelers. It's kind of interesting. I'll ask you this, May. Do you get the
Yeah.
inclination that they're gonna sign an old center? I don't. I
I,
think they're gonna go young. I think they're trying to
okay.
build this unit together as a group that's gonna be here for a long
Actually, that's a I was gonna ask you, and this I should have asked you this yesterday. You don't read into their seemingly lack of interest, like they didn't have any formal meetings at the combine with the top two centers, but they had obviously seen them at the Senior Bowl and stuff. So nothing to read into in your mind then.
No, 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 no. I don't. I think that they're going to be looking at those guys. I think they met with them already. There's no reason to formally meet with the guy you have already scouted so
Sure, because
thoroughly.
there is a number, like there's a limited number of formal meetings that you can do.
Yeah,
So
there's
why
only
use
45.
two? Yeah,
Now there were a few Senior Bowl guys that they formally met with that we know of. Jaheim Bell and McKinley Jackson were two of them, but it's just possible that they spent more time formally meeting with those guys at the Senior Bowl. Like they met
did
with
you
JPJ.
see? Did you see the side by side of Jaheim Bell and Jonnu Smith's like
No, I
mock
didn't.
draftables and RAS? They're identical.
Huh. I'm
I
not
think it was
surprised by
my guy. I think it was my guy Tyler Wise that put it up. It was either him or Nick Martin. One of them put up the side by sides, and they were like identical.
that. No, I'm not surprised by that at all. But those are like some of the guys that they have
Hmm.
met with at the senior
Right.
that maybe they didn't meet with at the Senior Bowl that they did meet with at the combine. But I'm almost certain they met with John, Jackson Powers Johnson, Zach Frazier, all those guys. So I don't read into it that much. I do think that they have to read into the fact that it's possible they don't get any of those guys though. It's
Sure.
right, there's not 7 of them. Now it's a good center class, like, even deeper down the board. You
Hmm.
got guys like Bo Limmer and Tanner Bortolini and Bo Limmer and, Hunter Norzad and all of these guys, Mason McCormick,
Van
like,
Pran.
yep, there's a lot of guys, man, that, like, are good at center that have some upside to them, but it also they aren't starters. So backup center, future center options possible. But I think the Steelers for a Mitch Morse type deal are probably going to pass because I think they're going to try and get someone that can at least stay there for 2, 3, 4 years. So whether that's Jackson Powers Johnson, Zach Frazier, whoever that might be, free agency, you're talking about, Andre James, Lloyd Cushenberry, Aaron Brewer, someone like that. If you're talking about younger players, I think they'll do that. Now, I'm not against adding Mitch Morse. He's a good scheme fit. Even at 32, he's
Mhm.
pretty athletic, but he's not quite the athlete that an Arthur Smith center should be. All right, remember
Sure.
that. The Arthur Smith center has to be an absolute cyborg in terms of athleticism. For the Steelers, they have one cyborg in the draft in Jackson Powers Johnson. Zach Frazier, I'm interested to see how he'll test. I think I like the athleticism on tape, but it's not as perfect as Jackson Powers Johnson's is. So I'm interested to see there. I still think, man, I don't know. I get the feeling they're signing Aaron Brewer. Like I don't have sources on that. I don't have anything. It's just a gut
Sure.
feeling. He's like a perfect fit for Arthur Smith at center. So and he's not going to cost like a super ton of money. Like he's going to cost like 7 a year. Like you can get him for like 214, 321, like something like that. Mitch Morse is a really good player. There's no doubt about it.
Mhm.
I would be in favor of signing him because he's a good player. But I think they're going to go for a younger guy. And I think that they want to start to build this group out to keep them together. Like the tackle they're probably going to end up drafting, they want to keep together with, James Daniels for a while, probably. Like James
Yeah.
Daniels is probably a prime extension candidate, right? Like that
Mhm.
makes sense. And so you're probably going to want to keep these guys together and start to really anchor this group down, and build it out like it was back through the whole 2010s where you had all that stability throughout the offensive line.
When you say young guy, do you mean double like in free agency or you mean the draft? Like, do you think they're gonna double dip though? Like bring in a veteran center and also like maybe not one like a Mitch Morse where you're talking about a high price guy you know is the starter, but somebody that could.
No, I think free agency makes sense. I don't think you can go into the draft with the room they have right now. It's just there's no one. And I don't believe the Nate Herbig talk. I don't. He barely played center in
Yeah.
practice last year. Like, let me just say this to you guys. Mason Cole, first, second team, took about 90% of the snaps last year in practice, and the backup center was Ryan McCall. Like, Nate Herbig was not
Mhm.
playing much center in practice last year. So,
Right.
can he do it? Yeah. But was he running it a ton? No. Like, there's no
Yeah.
chance I'm going to believe you're going to make that guy the starting center. Now, if you're telling me, okay, maybe we're flipping James Daniels to center, I can maybe get on board with that a little bit more. He's a natural center. It's probably not going to be that hard. But again, in the 2 full years I've seen James Daniels in a Pittsburgh Steelers uniform, that man has not taken one snap, not
No.
one
Right.
snap in practice, on the field, whatever, at center. So he's a guard to me at this point. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I think they are going to sign someone in free agency. I don't know how high they're going to shoot. Like, am I talking about them signing Matt Hennessy or am I talking about them signing Aaron Burr? Like, very different
Yeah.
levels to this. Those are just
Right.
two Arthur Smith guys, but I don't know necessarily. But I definitely think we're talking about a team that's going to add a center. And I think a center that they're going to feel pretty comfortable with starting out there in week one. So, yeah,
Mhm.
I think they're going to add a center. And I think Aaron Brewer makes a lot of sense. I get he's small. Like, I get he's a really small center. He is not big. He's like 280 pounds. I get it.
Yeah.
But the scheme they are running is perfect for that guy. Like, he is a great run blocker. His run game tape is dynamic. And theoretically, you think if you can put him around a quarterback that can move a little bit more and can be kind of a guy that can manage the pocket a little bit, maybe he can do, maybe his pass pro isn't going to be as bad because you're going to be running the ball so many times a game, anyways. So yeah, I really do think they're going to sign a center. I'm not sure who it's going to be. I don't think it's going to be Mitch Morse. Scheme fit for a 32-year-old running that much wide zone, a little bit dicey at this point, and more importantly, I just think that they're going to go younger.
Um, Donnie says so center or other position, if you were in charge, who was the one big name free agent, non-quarterback you would sign to the Steelers roster?
Big name non-quarterback.
Big
I mean,
name, non-quarterback free agent.
I don't know. There's really not one.
Does Chris Jones count? He's not signed back to Kansas City yet.
I mean, do we have to do realistic? Obviously, Chris Jones is the answer if you're not
No, no,
saying
no, no. I don't
realistic.
think it has to be realistic. I mean, he
Okay, then yeah.
said,
I mean, it's obviously Chris
yeah,
Jones.
yeah.
Obviously, Chris Jones.
But
If
like,
we're
who
talking like
even?
realistic,
Yeah.
big names, I mean, like the only big swing I can think of to me that makes sense is Christian Wilkins. Um, like that's the one name that makes sense to me. Like, it doesn't
Hmm.
really make sense to swing and go get Patrick Queen. Not really. Like first of all,
No, no.
spending that much money at linebacker, tough, dude. Like that's a tough sell to me. If you're gonna make a big move, make it in the trenches or in the secondary, or on the offensive line. Um,
Hmm.
I guess the other idea you could have is to go if you really want to take a swing at like tackle Tyron Smith. I don't know, but he's older,
Yeah.
injury prone,
Says you
tough
get through
sell,
the
right?
year.
So Wilkins is like the one guy like that makes sense. But if we get free reign to do it, I mean, Chris Jones.
Yeah. Right. Josh says, what aspect of Arthur Smith's offense do you think will have the quickest impact in the short term and biggest impact long term? It's an interesting question.
Short term, that's interesting. Long term, I think the biggest thing is gonna be the physicality that he brings to the skill positions because they're gonna
Yes.
draft the
Yeah.
type. Even if
Hmm.
Arthur Smith says, even if Arthur Smith sucks or he's like so good he gets another head coaching job and is gone in 2 years, one of those two scenarios, they're gonna be left with physicality because they're gonna draft those types. Like they're left with a
I'll
lot
be
of
honest. I think even the Zach is going further. The Zach Azani as the wide receivers coach plays into that too, like the disciplinarian blocking type receivers. Like, yeah, I think you are going to see a different type of receiver drafted.
Yeah, I agree with that. And
Yeah.
so I'm looking, at that. I think that's something that the physicality they're going to play with will be a long term thing. They're going to draft
Hmm.
those types of guys because that's what they want, and they're going to look for those types of guys. Because really, I mean, the NFL is looking for physical receivers now too. If you are running anything on the McVay Shanahan branch right now, you need physicality up front with your receivers because look at what Kyle Shanahan did all year. They ran the most condensed splits all year. And guess who was number two? Arthur Smith. Like it was one and
Yeah.
two. And I keep telling people this. Arthur Smith is branched off from Matt LaFleur, who's branched off from Sean McVay. They do a lot of similar things. And they play with those condensed splits. And so you're asking at times, you're gonna ask your receiver to fit in on a linebacker, to fit in sometimes and climb to the second level off the D end. Like you are gonna ask them to do that. Puka Nakua did it all last year. Jawan Jennings does it all the time in the
Hmm.
49ers offense. So you need someone like that. This is why, by the way, this is just an ancillary thing. This is why they're trying to keep Allen Robinson. I think they think he's that guy. I'm not sure I'm on
Yeah.
board with him as that guy. Because I think
Right.
the run game blocking tape from early last year when he was asked to do that was kind of rough. But they're going to ask him to do that, and so that's your long term impact. Your short term impact is tough. I mean, the short term impact is that play action's coming. Like I think so. You're going to be asked to see different routes, over routes, digs, crossers, different things like that. 2-man routes, so you're going to get a lot of max protect in. Probably more Darnell Washington next year.
Does it
Um,
make sense to say, you can tell me I'm an idiot, but like a more sheltered environment for the quarterback
for
in the
sure,
short term?
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. The rails on this offense are definitely hefty. When you have 2-man route concepts, it's kind of hard to screw it up so much, right? So the rails are up. I think the interesting thing about the play action stuff is how they're going to mix it with Kenny Pickett. I'm just if that's the plan, if Kenny is the plan to be QB1, you're going to ask him to go under center. You're going to ask him to do some things he maybe isn't as comfortable with. And I just don't know if you can switch to a full wide zone scheme that's different from what they did. If you could put him under center 70% of the time, which is what they did last year. And you looked at last year what Atlanta did, and their under center rate dropped. Like it went from, I think, 80% to like 59% or something. So Arthur Smith's like trying to like do more drop back shotgun stuff. So like, what are we actually going to see here from Arthur Smith? Are we actually going to see like Tennessee, or are we going to see a new version of this? Because I've been telling people this all off season, Smitty. I'm not sold we're getting the same old Arthur Smith offense. Like, I'm not. When the guy gets fired from a head coaching job, and part of the reason why was because his offense sucked, even if it's because the quarterback situation in that offense was terrible, you at least have to look and say, what can I do schematically to change things? And so you hire guys like Tom Arth, for example, from a completely different branch of any scheme you have ever run. You hire a guy like Mike Sullivan who stays on, again, completely different drop back concepts, like West Coast offense stuff. Like, it's interesting to me. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a more robust drop back passing game with some more shotgun put in, but maybe you
Yeah.
get play action shotgun stuff, which is what they started to do at times last year with Kenny Pickett a little bit before he got hurt. So I'm interested to see there. But play action, I think play action, motion, condensed splits, those three things. The immediate impact, those are those three.
Last thing before we get out of here, we're running low on time, but I got to get to this one because it's so different. I know we said we wouldn't talk about quarterbacks. This is quarterback related, but completely different from anything we've touched on. Baku says with no 5th round pick, and a lot of people thinking we'll take a 5th or 6th round talent quarterback. Do we trade back one of the 2 fours? They have back-to-back picks at 119 and 120. I think that's interesting because, like people have thrown around the idea of them obviously drafting somebody of the Jordan Travis, Joe Milton, Michael Pratt ilk, but like, is the 4th too high? But then is 197 going to be when those guys are all gone?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's not a ton of like late round injury among these quarterbacks, if we're being real. I mean, I don't know. Joe Milton, I guess, is the one guy with his big arm, but the tape ain't good. So
And do you
like,
trust this staff to be the ones to get it out of him? I think you're chasing obviously the arm talent and the size, what they could bring to the table, but like I don't know that this is the best landing spot for him to be able to get that out of him.
yeah, man, and it's tough because I mean, when you're talking about 120, I mean, you're probably talking about all of those guys being gone, him being the best option. Maybe Jordan Travis, if you trade back, is there because of the injury.
Okay.
So maybe he's the option. If that's the case, sure. But I mean, like, if we're talking 6th round, man, I mean, we're talking Austin Reed, Sam Hartman, like Devin Leary, Keaton Slovis. I mean, like
Hey, Slovis with that 40.
Talia Tagovailoa, like
Mm,
honestly, maybe kind of fits what they like with the football bloodlines and everything. Could be something. I don't know. Was that the Shrine game?
yeah.
So I mean, I guess, but honestly, man, if you don't draft one of those guys in the 3rd, 4th, if you don't draft the Rattler, Pratt, Travis type,
You almost feel like what's the point?
I think you just wait till UDFA at that point.
Yeah. That's fair. All right, Nick. Good stuff. Tell the people they can find you.
Yeah, you guys can find me on Twitter at Farabaugh FB. Of course, make sure to read Steelers.com, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and do all of that great stuff, guys.
There we go. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell here. Hit us in the comments. Any questions, any thoughts about what we talked about in this episode? Leave us a 5-star review, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from. You guys know the drill at this point. I am Zachary Smith, PGH, for Nick Farabaugh and myself. Thanks for jumping in. Take another ride on the Steelers afternoon drive.